Auditorium Bible class. This is being taught by Daryl. But Daryl's out today, and so here I am. I'm going to take over for one class. I believe you guys are finishing up Joseph. Thank you. Joseph. So if you're finishing up Joseph, that means you're in the last couple of chapters of Genesis. And so am I right? Is that where you've been? It's been longer than a few hours, I know. So, okay, so we're going to then let's turn on over. We'll look at those last three chapters. Of course, I might have just a tiny bit of overlap with where Daryl's been, but, we're basically going to hit 48, 49, and 50 of Genesis then, because that's the culmination of Joseph. And so here we go. We're kind of leaving that deep, like way in the past era, before the Israelites had even left Egypt, of course, of Exodus. And we're still in the Abraham, Isaac, Joseph era of going down to Egypt, right, to escape the famine. And so a couple of great things happen right at the end of the book. And so that's where we're going to be here in a few moments. I'll try to wrap that up then, this last little bit of the book. But first, we'll say a prayer, of course. And thanks for being here. Good to see everybody. It's like, as usual, you guys are all spread out here and comfortable, and we're in the blue chairs and auditorium class. So, yeah. I don't know how, but Daryl left here on the very last class of Joseph. It's the good stuff. Like the last three chapters of Genesis, that's the best stuff there is in the book. Man, it's so awesome. So I'm looking forward to this class. This will be awesome. And so thanks for being here. Let's pray. Father, we do praise you for your love for us and for your mercy and your just your work in the affairs of man. How you have a plan that is just that as many people as possible can become a part of your kingdom. And we know you're at work even today. And so, Father, we are amazed at what you've done in the distant past, and we know you're working just as well at this moment. So we praise you for that. Help us to grow in wisdom. Help us to be a people that do think about one another in this special way you have for your body. And it's in your Son's name we pray. Amen. Okay, Genesis 48, 49, and 50 is where we're going to be. We're going to kind of jump around in there. And so let me get over there too, because it's like these chapters are telling us so many great principles of how to live our lives as Christians. It's amazing that in a distant text, the culmination of this story way back with Jacob and all of his sons and Joseph and going to Egypt, how these particular chapters, 48, 49, and 50, they give us the so what. It's like, so Joseph went to Egypt. Okay, big deal. So it saved his people. I mean, it's like some people that lived and died thousands of years ago. Why is that like? I mean, lots and lots of stories. People have made life and death decisions throughout time. So why record these? What's the big deal? And so chapter 48, 49, and 50 give us the big deal to the story. And so as we work through this, we learn that there's actually a different way to look at things than what it seems. If you're around me for any length of time, you know that I really enjoy several sayings, and one of them, which is kind of like my rule number 3, but anyway, there's a whole bunch of them. Rule number 3 is things are never what they seem, ever. Like, you look at a situation or a person and you see them doing something and you think, I know why they're doing that. You have no idea why that just transpired. It's like impossible. Like, things are never what they seem. It's like, it's like on and on it goes, right? It's like you look at situations unfold and you're like, okay, what's going on there? You have no idea. They probably don't either, the people that are involved. It's just, the old stories about, we could get Bill up here. We get guys that have done this for a living that are professional, and they can tell us. It's like they interview 4 different people that saw some big situation unfold in a bank robbery or something, and they're going to get like 12 different things happen. You're like, these people are not even looking at the same thing. There's a whole different thing that went on because one was just, right? I'm upset. I just had a parent die. I'm here at the bank to sign the thing that transfers the funds to me, and this is a terrible day. My parent just died. And then and suddenly there was a bank robbery. Well, I don't remember anything that happened except they kind of like interjected this in the middle of this thing I had to get done. And so it looks all different from the bank teller's perspective, who's like, I was just minding my own business, passing out, things, and I was handed this slip, and it was like a scary-looking guy, and he was mean, and all of that, right? I mean, it's like, and so Genesis 48 and 49 and 50, what does that have to do with this text? Here's what it has to do with. We get the insider's view now. We get a chance for God to tell us, okay, you remember when Joseph went to Egypt? Let me tell you what that really means. You know how the brothers sold him into slavery and he ends up at Potiphar and then he goes through all those dreams and stuff? Let me tell you what that really means. And so now we get God telling us the real story, the big picture. And so there's a bunch of it, too much for the final 15 or 20 minutes that we have in a class. And so instead we'll just kind of take just 2 or 3 of them at the most as we have time and look at the big picture. And so let's pick up the story in chapter 48, starting in verse, we could pick it up with verse 11. And Israel said to Joseph, I never expected to see your face, and behold, God has let me see your children as well. It's like, Jacob's like, Israel's like, I can't believe this. I thought you were dead, and now I get to even see your children. Verse 10, now the eyes of Israel were so dim from age that he could not see. Did you catch it? Then Joseph brought them close to him, and he kissed them, the Joseph's kiddos, and he embraced them. And Israel said to Joseph, I never expected to see your face. And you're like, wait a minute, the text just said you can't see anymore. So it's a little nuance there of what is about to unfold in the text. He's like saying, come and see with me the way you really need to see things. It's like, let me tell you what's going on here. Let me explain what's happening, and like at the real level. So I love that little bit of text there where it says, oh, you can't see anymore, and then it says, I never expected to see you again, and here you are, and I'm seeing you face to face. And you're like, dude, you can't see. And it's like, well, you can see. He could see. And so whatever he was seeing, we need to see. So Joseph took them both, verse 13. Ephraim with his right hand toward Israel's left, and Manasseh with his left hand toward Israel's right, and brought them close to him. But Israel stretched out his right hand and laid it on the head of Ephraim, who was the younger, and his left hand on Manasseh's head, crossing his hands, although Manasseh was the firstborn. And so there's all these little subtle things, the little story beneath the story, like blessing the younger as the firstborn, and the second one the oldest as the secondborn. Kind of reminiscent of Jacob and Esau, right? And all the things that transpired back then. And so these little inside stories of how all this is going to work. And so it's just very powerful. So I'll read one more little bit, and then we can start just kind of like talking about the big picture stuff. Verse 17. When Joseph saw that his father laid his right hand on Ephraim's head, it displeased him, and he grasped his father's hand to remove it from Ephraim's head to Manasseh's head. And Joseph said to his father, Not so, my father, for this one is the firstborn. Place your right hand on his head. But his father refused and said, I know, my son, I know. I know. He also shall become a people, and he also shall be great. However, his younger brother shall be greater than he, and his descendants shall become a multitude of nations. And he blessed them that day, saying, By you Israel shall pronounce blessings, saying, May God make you like Ephraim and Manasseh. Then he put Ephraim before Manasseh. Then Israel said to Joseph, Behold, I'm about to die, but God will be with you and bring you back to the land of your fathers. And I give you one portion more than your brothers, which I took from the hand of the Amorite with my sword and my bow. So, some big picture stuff here. What is Jacob going to do? What has Jacob just done? What did he do in that little story? And he's about to do it in a big way in chapter 49. Then Jacob summons his sons, and he said, Assemble yourselves, that I may tell you what shall befall you in the days to come. What is Jacob doing? Okay, number one, he's sharing the vision. And it's not just his vision, it's God's vision. It's like Jacob's taking the moment to say, let me share with you what's really going on here. And so how does he do that now? So that's exactly spot on. He's sharing a vision with his sons and his grandsons. Why is that important? How does he do it? What is he doing here? Why is this such an important event? Enough that it's very wordy. I mean, it goes on and on and on for multiple paragraphs. An entire chapter of Genesis is about what this guy does to these children. Why is that so important? It's a good question. Why does he share the ugliness? Just like this moment when he's like, and Joseph's like, no, Father, don't do it. And he's like, too late, buddy. This is the way it works. This is what's going to happen in the future.
It doesn't say this, but the sons were raised without the knowledge of God. And now Jacob is tying their future to God because he's saying, I'm pronouncing the name of the God of Abraham and Isaac.
Uh-huh. Yes. Yeah. I mean, Joseph definitely is. I mean, you want to talk about being favored. It's like now his two sons are actually going to get, Joseph, like you're saying, Joseph's getting a double portion between Ephraim and Manasseh. And obviously, there's all the connotations of Joseph going down to Egypt and his faithfulness and service. And so God entering into this. Mm-hmm. 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 Yeah. Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, definitely. There's this like rearranging of things based on sort of what's going to happen in the future. So why? So he's being honest, truthful about the good and the bad. This future that's going to unfold in the 12 tribes of Israel and their conquering of Canaan, et cetera, et cetera. So any other thoughts? We have to look big picture here. It's like, this is not just, though, a blessing of an old man on his children. You don't want to think of this as just, he's pronouncing some future things, and then he'll be able to die and rest at ease. It's like, what is he doing through this? Why is this so important? Okay, a couple of things that I'll make some observations and we'll keep going in this text. So he lays out the vision for his family. What is he saying to them? What is he saying about how it works? What is he trying to instill in them? So when he does this, he's trying to help them see that they are a part of, they are connected to something bigger than themselves. That's what this story does. It's like it's no longer just some brothers that lived in Canaan. There were millions of brothers that lived in Canaan. There were millions of people that lived in Egypt. What is he doing when he does this little talk with them? He's saying to them, you guys are more, and it's true for all of us as humans, all of us as families can do this. He's connecting these relatives to something bigger. He's saying, now there's you, but really it's about God. And if you're connected to God, you become bigger. When I am connected to God's way of doing things and to God's vision and his unfolding of events, I become more than just a human being who's living in 2021. So that's what this does. It elevates people to a much higher place. And he does that when they understand they're connected to God. It's no longer just, any of them randomly will work, right? It's like it's no longer just verse 8, Judah, one of the tribes. It's like, no, through you, what's going to happen? See, through you, the Messiah will be born. So suddenly, your future offspring are more important than just people that have lived and died in the Old Testament. It's like, if you will be faithful to me, I will let you be a part of the producing of the Messiah. So it elevates us. That's what creates. So thinking about us today, how do I do this today? When I share with someone else this blessing, this vision, I want to make sure that I am incorporating an attachment to God. So it's like Esther. You can be silent and you'll fade in history as just another person who lived, or you can go to Xerxes. It's your choice. And so here's God's vision. He wants to protect his people. He wants them to survive all this so the Messiah can come about someday. And do you want to be a part of that or not? If you decide to be a part of it, you're joining in something much bigger than yourself, something that's eternal, lasting. So this stuff is eternal kind of talk. It's like it's something we all should be doing this with our own children, right? With our own children, with other families, with the church. It's such a huge component. You think about church work here at Longmont Church. It's like this is a part of what we think about, what we think about as ministers, right? Certainly on my side, it's like we're just a little church outside the Bible Belt with a handful of people trying to praise the Lord and work for Him in a little place called Longmont in the middle of nowhere, outside of Denver. We're not in a big urban place. And we're going to do our best to do our thing. That's how many churches think. And it's so sad because they have no what? Vision. It's like, see, we can connect ourselves to God. And yeah, it's we know we don't have the power. These guys don't have any power. They're nothing. Like literally nothing. They would have died in a famine if they'd have been left to their own devices. And so it's like there's nothing there that's impressive. Nobody goes, wow, those guys were really awesome. Nobody goes, wow, Judah really deserved to have the Messiah come through him. He was awesome. No, they weren't anything. They're just out there in the middle of nowhere, shepherds, living their lives poor out in the middle of Canaan. It's like, but as soon as they were connected to God's story, it elevated them to this whole other level. And so I know I'm making a big deal of that, but it's so much text. Any thoughts? So I think that's at the core of this. It's how do we help people connect themselves to something bigger than themselves? How do we help them see that when they come to Longmont Church of Christ, they're connecting themselves to something bigger than what they could be by themselves? How do we help our children see that? Like, how do we help our children understand? So I think that's what the blessing's all about. The blessing is helping them see you are special. Why are you special? Because you've decided to connect to God. That's the reason you're special. You're not special any other way, right? There is no other specialness. These guys aren't special because of any other reason except there's this decision that God's involved, and we're going to trust him. And when they don't do that, they fall out of their specialness. I guess the best way to say it, right? And so there's this, okay, how are you special? Well, because God's involved. Any other thoughts before I keep going here? Because there's lots of them. Oh man, we could stay on this text for months and months and months. We could have like a 13-week lesson on 48, 49, and 50. That'd be awesome. Yep.
Quick question.
Oh.
I've heard like families, parents, when their kids are getting ready to leave home, should do a blessing like
Yes.
so I think you're agreeing.
Yes.
Would you do a blessing like this?
We did.
God's help with your kids? It seems like some of it, like I have a sensitive daughter, she would be hurt. And it would hurt her to say, well, you've been late. She's not, but to say things like you've been lazy, but I hope with God's help you'll be better. Those kind of things. Is that,
I didn't do the blessing like that. Son. So we there's a couple of things there. One, these stories on this it is inspired by God. And I don't have that same inspiration. And so my blessing is going to have to be from my human perspective, right? And so I think we do the thing that empowers them beyond the weaknesses that they have, right? And so that's what I'm wanting the blessing to do. I'm wanting the blessing that in spite of their humanness, because here's what I think a part of this, like you're bringing up the kind of like now, I think children today, all of us are pounded, like we are pounded, and it's almost like okay, I'm pounded into, I'm ground down over time, and what this blessing is all about is connecting me to something bigger than myself, because I'm going to fail if I'm left to my own devices anyway. And so it's connecting me to God. And so I think for us today, it's got to be a positive blessing of, hey, if you will, it's and I think we have to be truthful, but truthful in the sense of some of the strengths that whoever it is we're giving the blessing to have, right? And some of that is not based on, I don't love you because you're really good at football, right? I don't love my child because they're really good at math. And so this blessing is beyond what they're doing, right? It's an acceptance and a love that says, I am your parent and I love and accept you no matter what. That's the blessing, isn't it? Because does God love you no matter what? Yes. So that's God's blessing in your life. God has said, I'm going to die on the cross whether or not you accept it. Matter of fact, while we are still enemies, I'm going to die on the cross, Romans 5:5-8. So the blessing here is basically a matter-of-fact statement that says that this is my position with you, and nothing else can change that. Now that we've established that, then I incorporate God into the picture, right? It's like, then I can bring this concept of helping them see they're special because they have a God in heaven who is willing and able to use them and for his will, if they will buy into that. And so there's multiple things there. That's an easy pronouncement. I mean, I can predict the future for every single one of us. If you will buy into God's will and do it today, I predict great things in your future. It's that simple, isn't it? It's like there'll be great stuff for God's kingdom if you buy into it. You may die on a curbside in Thailand, but that was good stuff. The journey was awesome. And so whatever it is God did with you. Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
Why would God have taken the man who saved
Uh-huh.
his people and kind of made him invisible for the future?
Uh-huh. That's a good question. Wow, I didn't really think we'd be going there today. I mean, obviously I have an opinion on it, but but you guys get what he's saying? It's like Joseph here. Let me pull in a couple of verses to kind of flesh that out, and then I think that'll help with it because we are going to run out of time, and I think that'd be a good place as any is to go next. And so, chapter 50. Look at this real quick with me. And so Jacob does these blessings. Verse 28 of 49, all these are the 12 tribes of Israel, and this is what their father said to them. When he blessed them every one with the blessing appropriate to him. Then he charged them and said, I'm about to be gathered to my people. Bury me with my father back over, back in the cave. So they took him back to the cave, and where they had buried Abraham and Sarah, and there they had buried Isaac and his wife Rebekah, and there I buried Leah. And the field and the cave that is in it, purchased from the sons of Heth. Again, it's a subtle thing. It happened, way back in Genesis, but 31 is so awesome. It's just a little reminder that he worked all those years and he wanted to, marry a particular girl, but who gets buried in the cave? Leah. Who gets buried in the place? The other one, they just bury her along the side of the road. And so it's very telling of what he thinks about these wives down the road, because Leah is the wife that gets buried with Abraham, and right, et cetera, et cetera. Anyway, Jacob finishes charging his sons. He drew his feet into the bed, breathed his last, and was gathered to his people. Then Joseph fell on his father's face and wept over him. And of course, at that moment, what do these brothers all think? Oh no, now that he's died, maybe Joseph will renege and try to kill us now for all that we've done to him. And then, of course, we get this great little side point, right? They do their thing and buried him, verse 14. Verse 15, when Joseph's brothers saw that their father was dead, they said, what if Joseph should bear a grudge against us and pay us back in full for all the wrong which we did to him? So they sent a message to Joseph saying, your father charged before he died, saying, thus you shall say to Joseph, please forgive, I beg you. They still don't get it. These brothers are so clueless. It's like it's like a little subtle representation of what the Israelite tribes are like all along. It's like, how many times did they leave Egypt? Moses is like leading them out with all the gold of Egypt, and they finally get to the Red Sea, and they're like, oh no, we're going to die. God's terrible. And you're like, where have you been the last 500 years? It's like, what would possess you to say that? And it's like, Joseph's already forgiven you the transgression of your... But anyway, they make up this story. For they did you wrong. And now please forgive the transgression of the servants. It is nice because they're admitting that they were wrong. And Joseph wept when they spoke to him. I would too. It's like, it's like, when are you guys going to get a clue? But anyway, he said that his brothers also came and fell down before him. And Joseph says those great words. These are the most important words in the book of Genesis. So we should read them since we're closing out. And then we're going to get to this question of, oh no, Joseph is gone. And so let's read this. But Joseph said to them, again, the most important words in the book of Genesis. If you only think of only these words, then this is the only words you'll ever need to know from the book of Genesis. Do not be afraid, for am I in God's place? That was your answer, by the way. We'll make it bigger. But anyway, and as for you, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good in order to bring about this present result. What's the present result? To preserve many people alive. Well, why preserve many people alive? I'm adding in now. Well, did you not just hear? There's going to be a Messiah born who's going to bless all the nations of the earth. Have you not been paying attention to the whole book? He's going to he's going to crush the head of Satan. He's going to do something about all the sin that you see everywhere. Have you not been paying attention? And so, as for you, you meant evil, but God meant it for good. So, verse 21, therefore do not be afraid. I will provide for you and your little ones. So he comforted them and spoke kindly to them. It's the best words in the book. So Joseph did a whole bunch of stuff in 3 little verses. What did Joseph just say? A part of that will be the answer to that question. Why is Joseph not even selected and his 2 sons are instead? We also get an indication of what's going on here. We get so much about the book, right? It's like, what is he saying to us in those 3 little verses? Joseph he really bought into the vision, didn't he? He paid attention. He saw God at work. And he said, okay, God has a different story going on at this moment in time. It's like God has something going on, and it is way different from what you desire. It's like you desired bad for me, and God has a whole different story. It's like amazing to see that, Joseph's understanding of this. So, any thoughts in the last 10 minutes we have? Or I can keep talking, of course. What jumps out at you here? It's like, what's so amazing about Joseph? Maybe we start with that. Yeah.
If we were writing this story, would we not have the Messiah come through Joseph?
Yeah.
Because he's the guy that's been this great thing. So
Yeah.
why, what are we missing that instead of God having the Messiah come through Joseph, we go through Judah? Judah's blessing is a pretty good blessing.
Yeah.
It says the Messiah is going to come through him.
Right. Like his, basically it says your offspring will be the king forever and ever. Period. Pretty good blessing.
But if we were to do it, obviously we would go with the obvious choice.
Yeah. I mean, Joseph. Yeah. So what does that tell us? Go ahead.
Seems like
Yeah, that is so telling what Joseph said there. Mark?
Hebrews 11 caps some more weirdness.
Yes. Yes.
Verse 22, by faith, Joseph at the end of his life mentioned the exodus of the sons of Israel and gave instructions about his burial.
Yes. And we've got that right there in this text about, hey, don't forget, take my bones back with you. And of course they will. You know, that's a part of what they do. They keep that promise. But
It's not all the heroic stuff that he did. It's not all the, the exciting
Uh-uh.
stories and everything.
Nope.
It's end of life direction to his children
It's like,
that makes the by faith.
and what was it? It was just simply, he believed that God would take the Israelites back to Canaan without ever seeing it happen. He's like, someday God's going to do this. Take me with you. And God said, wow, look at the faith of that guy. It's like, it's all wrapped up in that, in this understanding of what God is. It's like, it's so, I keep wanting to use it's like when you replicate. It's not repetitious, it's imitate. It's so, it's so easy to imitate the faith of Joseph. It's like Joseph's faith is not some profound, like, I am going to do the following things by faith. And then he does all this wonderful stuff. He just simply says, here's my faith. God said it, and I believe it. Done. It's like, and so he keeps having these moments where he has to say it over and over. Don't you know? I just believe it because God said it. It's like, this is what God does, and I believe it. And so here this place where he's like, for am I in God's place? I'm not God. It's like, this is what I've been trying to tell you. It's like, this is it's God's at work. And do you trust that God's at work and that God's working through all this stuff? And the blessing is when we connect somebody else to that concept. God's at work. Do you want to be a part of it? Be a part of it, and your life will be bigger too. Your life will be something more than you could possibly imagine if you will connect up with God, who's doing all these things. And so, yes, do not be afraid, for am I in God's place? You know, Joseph is lots of things, right? He's a type of Christ, the Savior. He gave his life for his brothers and, in effect, was resurrected there in Egypt and all of that. And then, like you're saying, he's done. It's like there's no, like, tribe of Joseph that lives on. It does, of course, through his two sons. But so what does that mean? What does that say to us?
The people aren't as important as the outcome.
Yeah. Yeah.
You can see through like Moses just kind of disappears.
Yeah.
David's about the only one that is really elevated. And sometimes you look at the life of David, you wonder, well, he really messed up a lot, but he's kind of
Well, he's only elevated because,
his image. I mean, the throne of David.
but what's the last thing on David? So even David, they all do it. It's all done the same way. Like even David. Like the last word on David is Acts chapter 2. And to this day, you see over there, he's dead. Did I mention? He's dead. But Jesus is alive. That's Acts 2 sermon, isn't it? It's like every single one of these, it's just like, and Joseph understood that he was a part, it's like we're saying, Joseph understood that he was a part of a big plan, this big, what we call a scheme of redemption or the thread of redemption that goes in the Old Testament. And Joseph understands he's got a part to play. And he's bought into it, and that made him special. But all individuals that buy into the scheme of redemption are special because it's about God and not about them. And so he's like, I'm not God. God's God. And I'm just trusting in faith. And so it becomes this, it's like the heart of it, isn't it? It's like you and I are meant to buy into the vision of God as doing his thing, and he is, and that's our part. That's our role. And that makes me no less and no more. Isn't that great news? I think that's the greatest thing about this question. It's like, I am no less important than Joseph. And my children are no less important than Joseph. It's just, and the church family is no less important than Joseph. But we're no more important than Joseph. It's like we can be just as valuable in the kingdom. It's like God doesn't look at it the way we look at it. He doesn't like measure. Because as Mark said, how does he get mentioned in the does it even mention that he's like had this brilliant plan to do the 7 years of famine and 7 years of good crops and what it made for Pharaoh and Egypt and how that sets it all up? No. He believed God said there'll be an Exodus someday, and he said, I believe it. That's what's going to happen. So take my bones. And God's like, you're the man. And you think, wow, I can do that. I kind of think I can imitate that. Like God said all these promises and thoughts in the New Testament. Do we believe it or not? Yes.
I don't think that this is the reason, but it's an interesting lesson that we might gain from this is the fact that I'm not absolutely sure, but I think that Ephraim and Manasseh would have been considered half-breeds because
They're
they were
Egyptian mothers.
half Egyptian.
Right.
And God does this over and over again.
Oh,
Takes
yeah.
people that we might not totally approve of
Mm-hmm.
and uses them in great ways. And I don't think that that was the reason that God had some other reason, but
Mm-hmm.
it is a lesson that
Mhm.
we can gain from this
Mhm.
because so often we have in mind who God is going to use. God has a totally different mind.
Yeah, he's not yeah, that should be the lesson, isn't it? God looks at all this stuff way different than we do. That's the genealogy lesson, isn't it? It's like the genealogy lesson, if we go to Matthew 1, is wow, God uses some people like, Rahab or Ruth, or right on and on it goes. These people where you're like, why are they in this? Because it doesn't fit. And so, yeah, again, it's that all of us can be used by God. It's not based on our intelligence, our cunningness, or our willingness to understand a plan, or it's so not based on a bunch of things that we humans base stuff on. So that's getting us back, and we're out of time, so this is perfect. It's like I think that brings us full circle to this concept of the blessing. I think the blessing chapter is at its location on purpose. That he's tying that together. That my unconditional love for children, or or God's unconditional love for us, is not based on how smart we are, or how, like a whole host of things. It's like so amazing. And the only thing that you and I have to control is how much do we want to be a part of the plan. And how do we do that? We live by faith. That's all it is. We just live by faith. And we're in the inner circle of the vision of the future. And somehow whatever it is God has in store for mankind, we are suddenly at the heart of it if we are living by by faith. And if a church is living by faith collectively, we are at the heart of whatever it is God's doing on this planet at this moment. It's like we are the central focus point if we are living by faith collectively. It's so much, that faith is just like multiplied, isn't it? And so I think it's cool that Joseph did his part, and then boom, he's gone. And then it's that wow, you and I have to stay faithful to the end, of course, of our lives, but collectively, do we see ourselves as part of a bigger picture, a bigger thing that's happening, and how God's controlling it? You know, I think relatively minor lessons, like does God use sin to do good things? Of course he does. I think it's his preferred method. I mean, there's lots of minor lessons that I think most of us probably have a grasp of right now, at least in this room. Things like, does God like these guys meant for evil for Joseph, and they did all this stuff, and they thought they were in control and making all these decisions, and God's like, oh, yet again, you've done exactly what I needed, right? I could just see God like, ha, 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 in his sense of humor, like, you thought you were doing, look, and then boom. And so we know that's the way God works in all of our lives. Never think that Satan is thwarting God's plans through the wickedness of men. Because, I mean, that's kind of an undercurrent, right? That's part of the scheme trying to be thwarted by Satan, because after all, he doesn't want his head to be crushed. And so he thinks he's winning out in all these junctions. And then, of course, he's not, but he thinks he is. So lots of stories there. Well, we're out of time. Some great thoughts, I think. You guys had some great thoughts on this. Thank you so much for joining in. Some interesting, that's an interesting thought about Joseph, isn't it? It's like, poof, he did his part, and then he's done. But they don't forget his bones, right? They take his bones, bury them in the cave, right? Down the road. And so there's that. 400 years later, carrying the bones. Yeah. Well, you know, they cremated. He was cremated. That whole ritual thing that Egypt did. And he was probably buried at a very prominent spot somewhere in the Valley of Kings, or somewhere nearby, right? Kind of thing. So they would know back then. But strangeness still. All right. Thanks for being here, guys. Have a good day.
like, well,